Good morning. It's great to see you all here. My name is Laura Taducci Downs, and I'm the president of your GW Alumni Association. It is great to see you here, and welcome to Alumni Weekend 2009. This morning, President Knapp will share his vision, goals, and priorities for the university. President Knapp's remarks are also being webcast across campus cable and will be available for viewing on our alumni website. The format for this morning's presentation will take the form of an interview that will be conducted by our distinguished GW colleague, Richard Golden. It is now my honor to introduce Richard Golden. Dick Golden joined the George Washington University staff as Special Assistant for Broadcast Operations and University Events in March of 2005. As part of the events team, he has been involved in the planning and staging of 3 commencements, 4 U.S. presidential visits to the university, Chief Justice John Roberts' participation in a GW Law School moot court, and an honorary degree ceremony for UN Secretary Kofi Annan. As Special Assistant for Broadcast Operations, he serves as staff advisor to the student-run radio station, WRGW, and works on special GW radio and television projects. Dick also hosts 2 weekly XM satellite programs produced by GW, American Jazz, heard on Sundays on XM from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m., and Beyond Category, which airs 3 times each week on XM and is co-hosted by a 2001 GW honorary degree recipient, Tony Bennett. Dick has lectured at educational seminars for the Smithsonian Associates and hosted concerts for the Voice of America and the U.S. service bands in D.C. Dick is known campus-wide for his melodious voice, his love of jazz, and his extensive radio career. It is now my pleasure to also introduce President Steven Knapp. Steven Knapp is in his 3rd year as president of the George Washington University. His priorities include enhancing the university's partnerships with neighboring institutions, raising its preeminence in research, strengthening its worldwide community of alumni, expanding its students' opportunities for public engagement and service, and leading its transformation into a model of urban sustainability. A proponent of fostering close community ties, Dr. Knapp serves on the board of directors of the National Symphony Orchestra and the Greater Washington Urban League. He is a member of the executive committees of the Council on Competitiveness and the Federal City Council. He is also a member of the Economic Club of Washington and the Committee for Economic Development. Prior to joining GW, Dr. Knapp taught at the University of California at Berkeley and served as Dean of Arts and Sciences and then as Provost of the Johns Hopkins University. He earned his doctorate and master's degrees from Cornell University and his Bachelor of Arts degree from Yale University. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage Dick Golden and President Steven Knapp.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you, Jill. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Laura, and thank all of you for being here in this beautiful October morning. We want to thank Adrienne Rulnick and her great staff and all the people here at Jack Morton Auditorium for accommodating us on this Saturday morning, and welcome so many of our alumni back here to D.C. We're going to expand for an hour on some of the things that are happening here, the dynamic initiatives of President Knapp, and then toward the end of our conversation, invite some of your opinions and questions and observations. So we want to remind you and instill in you and view in you some of the great things that are going on here, but you remind us when you come back here each year or when you get in touch with the alumni office of the continuing distinction you bring this great university. And President Knapp, just this past Thursday evening, the Alumni Achievement Awards dinner took place, and I know you were so impressed with the recipients of the awards this year.
Yes, this was my 3rd opportunity to participate in that ceremony, but I have to say that I was just I was really overwhelmed by the speeches that the recipients gave. First of all, the deans introduced them, and that they did a very nice job of talking about their achievements over the course of their careers, but then to have them get up one after the other and give these just spectacular speeches. Vincent Gray, who's the chair of the D.C. Council, the City Council, here in our capital city talked about coming here in the early 60s when, having been a star athlete in high school, he was unable to get on an athletic team here. He's a baseball player because of the segregation of athletics here at that time at George Washington. And that gave him a entree into talking about how the university had changed, and he spoke very interestingly about the way in which we're now engaged with the community, really not just in the city, but really of the city of Washington. And I thought it was a very moving account of how his career had been shaped by that experience, because he stuck with it, and he was the first African-American student to become a fraternity member and ultimately the president of his fraternity. We heard from Paul Anthony, who's a graduate of both our medical school and our public health school, and had just returned from his second combat tour. He was in Iraq, and then he was in Afghanistan, where he was helping our wounded soldiers there, also flying combat missions as a pilot, and he's an expert in public health, so it was an extraordinary combination. We heard from Liz McCartney, who's a graduate of our education school, who set up a nonprofit organization to build houses in Louisiana following Hurricane Katrina. She went down there, was moved by what she saw, and went into that line of work. One of our recent alumni, Andrew Brown, has set up an international language training program, a nonprofit that he created himself while he was still a student here, that provides the language skills that members of non-governmental organizations and government relief workers need to go into countries like Haiti and a variety of African countries. I think they're teaching some 30 languages now in this program, and it's a program that he created himself. So it was just an extraordinary set. I'll mention the last one, just because I'm still so excited about this one. Christina Puhalski created here a program in medicine and spirituality. She is actually a physician here and also an expert in spirituality, and that program is now a model for other universities around the country. They provide grants to start similar programs really around the country, and it's a way of encouraging physicians and giving them the skills to listen to the life stories of their patients. So she's having a direct impact through that program on the lives of countless people around the country. So it was just an extraordinary collection of our alumni, and it talks about the way alumni are the means by which we truly have an impact on the world around us.
Yes, and what great distinction you continue to bring GW. Every time we pick up a newspaper and see someone doing something noble, and a graduate of the GW University in 1946 or 1973. And now for the alumni, we want to try and communicate to you some of the extraordinary things that have been going on over the last almost 800 days of your presidency here. And I don't think anyone on campus has been more moved or aware of the issue of sustainability than in your tenure. You, in your personal life, you have a focus on that and a consciousness about that. How, as an institution, have you responded to this issue?
Well, when I first arrived, this was back in August of 2007, one of the very first things I did was set up a task force on sustainability. And I have to say that part of that was driven by my own interest in the issue, but it was also a result of the passion of our students, who are so committed to this issue now. And I think it's because as they look down to the course of their lives and look at what the world could become because of the environmental challenges, whether you focus on climate change or whether you focus on energy security, and we have faculty and students who are interested in all those areas, it's something that our students are really committed to and really passionate about. But the other factor here is we're in a city here in Washington that really wants to become a model of urban sustainability, and we have been partnering with the District of Columbia. In fact, we've had 2 symposiums right here in this space. We had one last October, and then in the Marvin Center across the street, we had a policy greenhouse in which we invited people to come and present their ideas to the DC leadership about ways in which the city could save energy, could reduce its climate impact, and so on. We were actually the first university in the District of Columbia to sign the American College University President's Climate Commitment. And as a result of that, we created an Office of Sustainability. This was also one of the recommendations of our task force. Our Columbian College of Arts and Sciences, the summer after I arrived, established a Solar Energy Institute. And right now we're building up a team of scientists and engineers on our Virginia Science and Technology campus. This is our campus, a 100-acre campus, just a few miles north of Dulles Airport, where we're doing cutting-edge work in developing alternative fuels. So it's really across the spectrum. We have a strong group in our law school that works on environmental law. We have an interest in global health and its relation to environment through our School of Public Health and Health Services. We have people working in medicine on these issues. It's really across the whole university. But I give a tremendous amount of credit to our students. And once we announced that we were involved in this activity, a lot of our alumni have approached us and expressed their interest. So we actually created a Green Council of Alumni to help advise us and make the kind of connections that would help us be leaders in this field.
I think Ted Turner, when he was here in I believe it was this past April, at the Institute for Analysis of Solar Energy launch, he said that, and I'm quoting him now, I'm excited that George Washington University is really thinking big about the issues that energy, to be a leader in resources going forward, and that solar energy could be a great resource, and thanks to GW's initiatives in this particular area. You look for a continuing imprint from the analysis of solar energy, correct?
Absolutely right. Yeah, and he was one of the contributors to our that made it possible for us to establish the institute. I'll say though that and there are two sides to this, because we're trying to have an impact on the field of sustainability through the work of our faculty in all these areas, including the Solar Energy Institute that you mentioned. But in addition to that, we're trying to sort of practice what we preach by paying attention to what we're doing right here on our campus. And we've just created, I hope our alumni on campus this weekend have a chance to see it. It's a beautiful new residence hall. It's called South Hall. It's on F Street facing south. And we expect that building, we know it's going to have at least a silver LEED rating. We're hopeful, we're sort of 1 point away at this stage as they go through the review of this. It looks like we may even get a gold standard for that building. But in any case, there are bamboo materials in there. We had an idea from a student, which I'll mention very briefly, which is that we discovered that if we added filtered water system to that building, it would save 250,000 plastic bottles of water a year in that single residence hall. And that was an idea a student came up with.
I know you mentioned at the Green at Work event this past June that you and Diane, your wife, walk around the campus, and you're continually open to students or faculty or staff people coming up to you if they have a better idea to let you know about it.
That's right, yes.
You've created that sort of a culture.
Usually the attraction is our small dog named Ruffles, who is certainly the most popular member of our family, and she does tend to draw a crowd, and so we can talk about whatever we want once we've attracted people.
And I think actually at the Green at Work event here on the campus in June, you mentioned she was a recyclable dog, actually.
Entirely made of recycled materials. That's right.
I'd like to talk about another very important issue, and that's, of course, affordability. I think everyone is talking about expenses in every area of their life, but especially affordability in higher education. And this past September, you welcomed the class of 2013 to GW. We had 20,000 applications this past year. Right. The 67% of the incoming freshmen that you welcomed in September at the Smith Center graduated in the top 10% of their class. A very admirable accomplishment, I think. But the question is affordability, and how is GW responding to increased tuitions?
Well, I think the word is finally getting out that we have a unique program here in which we not only do we have a fixed tuition for up to 5 years. If their students are in good standing, they never see an increase in their tuition after the first year they arrive at our institution. Not only that, but we guarantee their scholarship aid. So if a student's on financial aid, that scholarship never goes down over those 5 years. So it's a genuine guaranteed price for the entire up to 5 years. Mm-hmm. We've gotten a reputation for being a highly expensive university because the sticker price for that first year in which a student arrives does place us near the top of U.S. institutions. But if you take into account the total cost of an undergraduate degree, we're not even in the top 20 in terms of expenses in institutions. So I think it's important to emphasize that because a lot of people aren't aware of it. I think our families of our students are aware of it, and I think especially in these turbulent economic times, to have that kind of predictability and to know exactly what you're going to pay for the entire length of a student's studies, I think is a real benefit to families in a period of uncertainty. But we haven't stopped with that. We've also moderated the growth of tuition. I started an affordability initiative, again, when I first arrived. We've moderated the growth of tuition. We've kept it down to inflation now for 2 years in a row. We expect to continue doing that. Our greatest challenge as an institution when it comes to our affordability and indeed to the resources we have to invest in our academic programs is that we have less philanthropic support for our scholarships, for our student aid, than the institutions with which we compete. So that's really, I think, an essential point to understand about our institution. In other words, we have less endowment for scholarships and less in the way of gifts for current use supporting scholarships. And that means we have to take our student aid out of our tuition revenues. You get into this sort of vicious cycle where you increase your price to enable people to afford the price. And that's something we have to work our way out of. And we're doing that by moderating the growth of tuition, by continuing our fixed cost and guaranteed aid program, and above all, by dramatically increasing, through the efforts of all our deans, they're all very much involved in this because it benefits every one of our schools, bringing in support for students, undergraduate as well as graduate students, because that's what's really going to increase our competitiveness as an institution and reduce the burden on debt with which our students graduate and make it easier for families to contemplate coming to an expensive private university.
You attended a briefing, a financial seminar Chairman Ramsey conducted this past week. What was your assessment of
just yesterday?
Yes.
Well, it was a sobering presentation. I think it's very Chairman Ramsey. Russ Ramsey is an investment expert who happens to be the chair of our board and is a 1981 alumnus, was a star baseball player when he was here, and was rather brilliant at marshaling the facts about the economy. I'd say he's rather bearish on the economy at the moment, so I think a lot of people went back and checked their portfolios after listening to that presentation. But it's a great program. This is part of a conference because of a course that he and his wife Norma launched here, in which students in our business school actually get to manage some of the funds in the investment, and they performed extraordinarily well. I mean, they beat the market rather significantly this past year. And every year there's a conference in which experts are brought in to talk about the state of the economy in one aspect or another. This year it was about asset allocation and agriculture. Those were the two focuses. But this is an ongoing, something we do every alumni weekend now. So I think it's the third year this has been running.
Of course, one of the impediments to recovery seems to be the high unemployment. It's almost at 10% now.
Yeah, and he was suggesting the real number is closer to 16%, but the official number is 9.8.
Wow. And in some parts of the country, I heard in Detroit it was 29%. The Great Depression, it was 30%. But it called to mind how the alumni office and the career services people react to that and some of the wonderful programs they have here at GW to help people get started in the career. In fact, I know some of you may be heading over to room 310 over in the Marvin Center, where you'll be able to engage with career counselors, and they offer students counseling on job opportunities, right. And it's a great resource, I think, for alumni at GW. One of your ambitions, and I think the presence of this group here today and the thousands who have come to George Washington University alumni this weekend, is your efforts to build a worldwide lifelong community. You've done extensive traveling around the world. What do you hear from alumni as you make your way around the world talking to them?
Well, first of all, I just want to comment that program that you talked about, in which we're reaching out to alumni, just as we do for students, to help identify career opportunities and help them undergo transitions if they need to into other careers. I think that's a sign of the way in which a university needs to become more and more engaged in an ongoing way with the community of alumni. Because, frankly, our alumni, as I said at the beginning, it's through our alumni that we really have our impact in the world, and we need to maintain that connection. And I talk about how I want to make sure that alumni always continue to see our university, the George Washington University, as their home here in the nation's capital. Many of them travel here from around the world. I've gone around the world now, actually to Asia 3 times, one Latin American trip. I'm probably going to India in the spring, to the Middle East last March. And everywhere I go, there is an extraordinary interest on the part of our alumni in connecting with the university. And alumni frequently come to events and talk about the ways in which the engagement with a particular professor has changed his or her life, and by opening the possibility of a career that they would never otherwise have contemplated. And I really hear that everywhere. We counted the number of alumni that I've met in one way or another in each of the 2 years that I've been doing this. There's 11,000 the first year, 13,000 the next year. I don't promise I'm going to keep increasing that every year. But we have 225,000 alumni around the world, so it's an extraordinarily large community. We have, by the way, a concentration here of some 70,000 just in the greater Washington area, and we have been very systematically building our staff in alumni relations to support the ongoing connection, because I think that, it's one thing to go to a city and go to a reception and meet a lot of people and shake a lot of hands and give a speech, but if there isn't the ongoing connection through technology, through a robust web presence, through identifying and keeping in touch with our alumni, then we really can't sustain that community, which is such an important part of what it means to be an institution like this.
Well, even this event here is being webcast live to alumni all around the world. Will be available on the website, as Laura mentioned earlier, in the weeks to come. And there have been many updates. We have a beautiful new web page, I think.
Yes.
The page is terrific.
Yeah, we've been. That's something we've been working hard on. The main page itself is now finished, and we now have to make sure that that's connected to everything we're doing in the university. So that's going to be an ongoing process of continuing to perfect that. But it's something that I really did make that a priority, because I think people have to be able to have a user-friendly way of getting in touch with us. And when I first arrived here, you couldn't. I would try to find something on the web just to see if you could do it, and more often than not, it just turned out you couldn't do it.
Yeah.
So that's something I thought we really needed to work on. But yeah, there's an international dimension of this. There's a technological dimension to it. I just want to mention one thing on the international front, which is that we're having our first ever global forum for alumni and other members of our worldwide community. It will be held in Hong Kong this coming November 13th and 14th. And I'd like to see as many as possible of our viewers and attendees here today. If you're traveling internationally and a lot of roads cross in Hong Kong, and if you happen to be out there, we're going to be having a number of our experts, including our alumni, who are experts in a variety of fields, are going to be leading that effort, including Susan Schwab, who is the recent U.S. trade representative, is one of our keynote speakers for that event. And we'll be having a lot of our faculty and staff will be there to engage with people. So it's going to be a great forum. It's an experiment to see if we can, in effect, take our show on the road internationally and really, I think, reconnect our alumni with the intellectual excitement of being part of a university community.
Well, it's amazing what a time to be going there. China this past week celebrating its 60th anniversary, and it's probably one of the most important relationships in the 21st century is this country and Asia. So you'll be in Hong Kong in November.
Yeah, China now sends more students to our university than any other country, which is a recent trend. That was not true until just a few years ago, but it's true now.
You mentioned traveling around the world, all over the country too. I know you're going to New York later this month to meet with alumni, but that sense of community is something that you've tried to cultivate here on campus with your residents, the F Street House.
Right.
And you and Diane are very hospitable hosts to many, many events. Can you talk about some of the... Yeah,
we had, the first, we opened the house for public events last October, and from then until the end of that academic year, we had 60 different events. The largest was a reception for the Congressional Black Caucus on the eve of the presidential inauguration. We had 250 people in the house. The next day, we had a luncheon there. We hosted a luncheon there for the Joint Chiefs of Staff, which was made possible because of one of our alumni, Admiral Thad Allen, who's the Coast Guard Commandant. And there's a tradition that on the day of every inauguration, the Joint Chiefs get together for a lunch somewhere. We happen to have Ulysses S. Grant's dining room furniture in the F Street House, so it seemed an appropriate setting for that luncheon.
Wonderful.
So 7 o'clock in the morning, the Honor Guard, Coast Guard Honor Guard was lined up on our steps, and generals and admirals and 4 wives and 1 daughter marched up there, and they had an entourage of about 40 lesser generals and admirals with them who had a box lunch in our conservatory while we sat around Grant's table eating lunch. So, but we've also had multiple. We've had coffees for faculty, dinners for students there. We just had a dinner for about 60 students last week.
Wow.
Excuse me, just allergies. And we've had a barbecue for our university police department. We had another barbecue for housekeeping and groundskeeping staff. We've had many alumni gatherings there. We've had open houses for the neighbors, for the community. I think they were sort of surprised the first time we did that, but now that's become an annual event. We expect to continue that tradition. So we really have used the house, I think, as a way of locating ourselves in, very much at the heart of the campus. We're right across the street from one of the university's most famous institutions, which is Thurston Hall, which I think means something to some people. It's been a real benefit to be able to be right there in the heart of the campus.
Someone told me recently about an event at the house that I thought was just terrific. I wish I could have witnessed this. You had the smallest residents of Foggy Bottom as guests for cookies and milk.
That was an unusual one. It turns out there are within a block or two of the house, there are 3 different daycare centers. So we had about 150 children of all ages in 3 different shifts come over for what we call milk and cookies. And a lot of our students, wouldn't have been possible if we didn't have students who were eager to help out in that event, I must tell you. But the first group showed up in a kind of a long plastic train of linked together strollers, because this was the smallest group. These were sort of 18-month-old children. And then we had, it was up to age 5. So yeah, that was an unusual kind of university event. But they're all part of the community. And in fact, many of them are children of our faculty and staff.
Wow. So. And they certainly brighten up the community, too, when you see them strolling around here,
yes,
around campus.
Tethered together or in these trains or whatever it might be. Right.
Another theme I would like to introduce, because it's taken over the last year such prominence. It's a theme that's been here for years. It's part of the George Washington University tradition. But it really, there was a moment that illuminated me to how deeply the word service and GW are synonymous when last December 3rd at Betts Auditorium you introduced to Bill Gates, who was here to speak on campus. And among the things he said after being introduced by President Knapp, this was a direct quote from Bill Gates, GW is a top school in many areas: public policy, the arts, politics, and scientific research. There are 2 additional facts about GW that impress me. First, you rank #1 among private universities in the number of students who become Peace Corps volunteers. And second, the largest employer of GW students last year was Teach for America. If young people in America make the kinds of choices that students are making here at GW, we're in for a great future. And though I had felt that intuitively about the university, to hear it from a citizen of the world, citizens Bill and Melinda Gates, I thought was quite a revealing moment for all of us.
Yes. Yeah.
And you have taken that word service, you invoked it at the freshman convocation in September, urging these students who were beginning their historical trek the next 4 years through this wonderful experience at GW on the weekend that Ted Kennedy was being buried.
Right.
And you mentioned the life of service that he gave to his country, and urged them, whatever else they do in the 4 years here, to take time to perform some public service. And within a couple of days, we had our first annual Freshman Day of Service.
Right.
Can you talk a little bit about
with the
that?
Freshman Day of Service, was the way we chose to commemorate the tragedy of September 11th this year. So it happened on that Friday, September 11th. And we had 1,400 freshmen who fanned out across the whole city here, performing community service. And two of those freshmen ended up going with President and Mrs. Obama to a house they were painting in one of our neighborhoods here in Washington. And on that occasion, the First Lady issued a challenge to the university. She said that if we perform 100,000 hours of public service as a university, faculty, students, and staff this year, she will be our commencement speaker on the Mall this coming May. So we thought that was a very nice kind of climax of a day of service, our first freshman day of service. And I can tell you, we are going to do those 100,000 hours. And if we hit April and we haven't reached the quote, I'm going to be cleaning every park in Washington D.C. But no, it's a hallmark of our. It's something again that our students are passionate about. Students are drawn here, whatever their interests are, whether they're interested in the arts, whether they're interested in engineering, whether they want to go on into medicine or law, into public policy, into foreign policy. They're drawn to this city because this is a university in which we really do engage with the world from our position here in the nation's capital. And I think it's what inspires the kind of passionate engagement of our students who come to us now from all 50 countries and from 150 countries around the world. And we, I think, take every opportunity we can to make it possible. This isn't something we're imposing on our students, it's something we're enabling them to do that they already have a passionate commitment to doing.
I don't know whether if there was a category in the Guinness Book of Records for earliest announced commencement speaker.
Yeah.
But if there isn't, there will be now, and George Washington University will.
Well, you can imagine as university president, it's a bit of a relief to have that taken care of in the first 2 weeks of a semester.
Right. It's pretty. I thought it was revealing too that when the Washington Post ran the story the following morning, they mentioned the First Lady's challenge, And then in parentheses, it said the community service office reported last year GW did 60,000
Right.
hours of community service. So the bar is already pretty high.
Right. Well, that's what makes us confident that we'll be able to do this.
One of the things I think that's important that I've observed my time here at GW is this whole subject of service and really values isn't something formalized in a classroom, that you have to really teach this by example. And I think of the many, many examples GW plays as a good neighbor here in the District of Columbia. A move-in day, for instance, the first contact people had with service is you and Diane leading thousands of people from the staff and faculty and administration in move-in day. So they get really a close touch with the service from the university. Can you talk about some of the other initiatives? We're partnering with the Duke Ellington School, the
Right.
Trachtenberg Scholarships.
Well, in fact, yeah, I can mention some of those partnerships. One that just had a new boost this year was our partnership with School Without Walls, which is a DC public school located right on our campus. It's on G Street, just a couple blocks from here. And that was an interesting example of a public-private partnership, because we had an arrangement with the city where we would help them renovate an historic school building, the home of the School Without Walls, and in return, they would provide that parking lot behind the school that became the site of South Hall, the sustainable new residence hall that I described earlier in our discussion. And we've created a new program there. It's called an early college program, which will enable 14 of the students in that high school to spend their last 2 years of high school enrolled in our university. And so when they graduate, they will have both an associate's degree from GW and a high school diploma from the School Without Walls. And I think that's an extraordinary program. That's on top of the usually 9 or so a year Trachtenberg scholarships that we provide to graduating seniors from public schools around the district, to whom we provide a free full scholarship. So we're talking about now covering 25 or so, 24, 25 students a year with full support from our university, and these are students in the District of Columbia Public Schools. So I think that's a pretty extraordinary program. The first of those I inherited, the Trachtenberg I inherited, and this new one we just created, but I think we've now established a tradition and a kind of reputation within the city for being a real community partner with the public schools, which of course, it's a challenge for every urban university to find ways of contributing to the local community, which have challenges, particularly in areas like public education. So I think that's a pretty good example of citizenship.
Sure, in our district. I'd like to talk a little bit now about your vision of the George Washington University as a preeminent research institution, right. And you've taken some very concrete steps in that direction. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think first to put it in context, George Washington really did envision a world-class university that would exist in the nation's capital. It was in his last will and testament when he died in 1799. And at that time, what he had in mind was a university in which you would bring together individuals from all 13 states, former colonies, so that they could together live and work together and forge a common national identity, instead of just having the regional biases that they acquired by growing up in one or the other of the colonies. So that was a deliberate vision on his part. That was something he chose to announce as a goal for the new nation. Well, today, to be a world-class university in the heart of this nation's capital means to have an impact not just on your local community, and not just to have an impact through the students you educate, but really to make a contribution to addressing pressing national and global problems. And you do that by becoming a fully recognized, highly distinguished and powerful research university. So to fulfill the vision today, what it means today to be the university that George Washington envisioned is to be a world-class research university. Mm-hmm. And we are on the path to do that. We've made tremendous progress in increasing, you said something about this earlier, increasing the selectivity of our undergraduate class. We built up our undergraduate program. We now have a residential undergraduate program. In former decades, we progressed from being a night school to a commuter school to now a fully residential university campus with 10,000 undergraduates, most of whom live right here on our campus. They're now drawn, as I said, from all 50 countries, from all 50 states, from 150 countries. They every year, their SAT scores and their class rankings go up. Mm-hmm. So we are making, and we will continue to make progress in building that undergraduate experience and increasing the selectivity of our undergraduate admissions. And in that way, we're becoming stronger and stronger as an undergraduate instructional university. We have to do the same thing with our graduate programs, where we have strengths in a number of areas. We could go around the university, and I could point to very highly ranked individual programs, but we need to develop that and become comprehensively a powerful research university to a much greater degree than has been our tradition, because traditionally we were more of an instructionally based university. Now we have to bring together research and instruction. So we're building up our School of Engineering. We're contemplating the creation of a new science and engineering complex here on our campus. I mentioned our science and technology campus out in Northern Virginia in Ashburn, north of Dulles Airport. I mentioned the work we're doing in sustainability. I could also point to extraordinary programs like our program in our School of Medicine addressing the neglected tropical diseases that afflict millions of people around the world and are not just the results of poverty, but in many ways the causes of poverty, because they're so debilitating in their effects on sometimes the whole population of a village will be infected with hookworm or schistosomiasis, or one of these terrible parasitic diseases, and we're addressing that directly through the work of our faculty here in our School of Medicine. We're addressing disparities in health. For our School of Public Health and Health Services, we're working on health policy. We're involved in the debate on all across the spectrum of that debate through the work of our faculty, providing expert advice to the policymakers. And I could point to other things. We talked about our Solar Energy Institute, which is another example. I can talk about our work on intellectual property in our School of Law, which is another one of the areas of strength. Our work in international business, where we're making intellectual contributions as well as training students. Across the university, you'll find areas where we're making a strong intellectual contribution to addressing the problems that are the most pressing challenges in the world today. And that's what you do as a distinguished research university. And by growing into that vision, we will achieve what George Washington had in mind and what that means in the 21st century.
And I mentioned Bill Gates being here last December 3rd. Actually, he was here to applaud one of the faculty in the medical school in his work in tropical
Well, that's Peter Hotez,
Yeah.
who is the head of that unit that I was talking about. He also is the head of the Sabin Foundation, which is supported by the Gates Foundation to do that very important work. One example of many ways in which our faculty are contributing.
If you had a crystal ball and you could gaze into that ball this morning, where would you see the George Washington University in this area and the others in say, in the next 8 to 10 years?
Well, I think there's no question that, again, as we continue to recruit more and more students, a more and more diverse body of students, with all the talents and the skills that are reflected in those statistics that you mentioned, 20,000 applications for a little more than 2,000 undergraduates. Actually, our applications last year were up for all of our schools, all of our programs, graduate as well as undergraduate, across the university. We're going to continue to grow what we're doing in Virginia. We are right now, and I think this may surprise a number of our alumni, we're the largest private university in the Commonwealth of Virginia. We teach thousands of graduate students all up and down Virginia, from that Ashburn campus all the way down to Hampton Roads. And I think you'll see that presence continue to grow. So I think we're on a trajectory now that will increasingly win recognition for being the most powerful and significant research university in one of the most significant regions in the world and in the heart of this nation's capital.
Well, we're going to take some questions and comments, actually, from our audience members. We're going to have somebody come down front here with a microphone, and if you had some comments or some questions or observations you'd like to pose this morning, we invite you to line up and do that. And as you're doing that, you've been here now almost 800 days as president. I know it's a whirlwind for you, but I think this coming Monday at the university is sort of a typical day at George Washington University, and I think you'll agree, in that our students will have a choice to go to Lisner Auditorium to hear Christiane Amanpour and Frank Sesno is on our faculty, interview Robert Gates and Hillary Clinton, or they can go to the National Press Club and hear the publisher of the USA Today and the executive editor of the Washington Post on the Calb Report. And it just goes on and on like that here at George Washington University. You have had some amazing moments in your time here. I've witnessed some of them, some in this on this stage. Can you talk about some of the people you've met and some impressions you've gathered from people you've met here.
Well, we do have an opportunity to convene important discussions on our campus, and I think the one that you mentioned to start with, I don't know of any other time where we've had a sitting Secretary of State and a sitting Secretary of Defense together on a single stage to talk about the issues that are challenging our nation at this moment, and to be interviewed by one of our faculty, Frank Sesno, who was recently appointed as the Dean of our School of Media and Public Affairs, which is part of our Columbian College of Arts and Sciences. And Frank Sesno is still working as a reporter for CNN. This will be a CNN broadcast program. And it's an example of what it means to have a location like this in which we can, not just location, but also strengthen our faculty to bring together and to convene these conversations of the kind that you described. One of the first events I attended did take place on this stage, was a History Makers event celebrating the career of Quincy Jones, an extraordinary artist and cultural figure, entrepreneur, who I think has more gold albums than any other artist in history, including the best-selling album of all time, Thriller, which he produced. All of you, everyone in the audience here has heard his music that he's written and performed, whether you know it or not, because it's been going on now for some 5 decades that he's been a successful artist. And so it's the arts as well as policy and politics. We've launched the Jazz Appreciation Month here. That I think I participated in that the first year I was here. Again,
it was a terrific night on this auditorium. Ramsey Lewis was here.
We've had we've had Stephen Hawking's here for an event that was celebrating an important anniversary for NASA. So we've had the director of NASA or the secretary, the administrator of NASA here on our campus, and we have a space policy program that made that connection possible. That's part of our Elliott School of International Affairs. We conferred an honorary degree on the president of Korea here over the summer, whose name is Lee Myung-bak, and regards himself as an alumnus of the university because he spent 2 years in our business school here at one point earlier in his career before he went on to become the mayor of Seoul and then was elected president 2 years ago in a inaugural ceremony that I had the privilege of attending in Korea. So it's international figures, it's national leaders, it's leading figures in the arts and the sciences, and we bring them all here because, Washington is a crossroads of global interaction in all those fields. So
I remember
we do this all the time.
The comments from the president of Korea when he stood here after you conferred the degree on him, and he said, "I used to walk around Kogan Plaza while I was attending GW wondering, what can I do for my country?" It was a pretty powerful statement from a sitting president. If we have any comments or questions, please come forward. I'll make one. This is a story that, to me, is a GW story and what happens here that's so exciting. You mentioned Stephen Hawking. He was here a year ago, April, on the 21st of April, and a friend of mine who's a scientist and on the faculty at BU called me on the 18th of April, and I was in my office at Rice Hall, and she said, how did you get Steve Hawking? And I said, well, NASA's celebrating their 50th anniversary. The president of the university, Steven Knapp, is going to introduce Stephen Hawking. And she said, but how did you do that? How were you able to get him there? You're not a science school. How did you get? And I was trying to be, I knew she was being very envious, and I wanted to be diplomatic. And all of a sudden, there was this cacophonous sound outside of motorcycles and police cars, and she said, what's that? And I said, wait a minute. And I put the phone down and let the news, and then it occurred to me what it was, and I picked up the phone. She said, what was that? And I said, the Pope was just going by. I said, really? He's on the way to the White House. A Friday morning at GW. Please, would you give your name and
Sure. Good morning. My name is Kristen Carrillo.
Morning.
And I just wanted to ask, you had mentioned specifically about some of the draws for kind of a high caliber of student and mentioned some of the percentages and things. I was wondering if you'd talk a little bit about some of the special programs. I was thinking of things like Women in Leadership, Honors Program, some of the things that really are a draw sort of beyond the specific schools and academic programs for students.
Well, the Women Leadership Program, this is, I think, a heritage. When we acquired the former Mount Vernon College, Women's College, that is now our Mount Vernon campus, just above Georgetown, not too far from here. We sort of have Georgetown surrounded now because of our two campuses. We really made a commitment at that time to maintain the tradition of focusing on women's leadership by maintaining that program on the campus. And actually every year we bring extraordinary speakers whom we recognize on our Mount Vernon campus who are women leaders to emphasize the importance of that program. So you're absolutely right. I think that is a draw for students. We've had an ongoing honors program. These are all programs that I inherited and am glad to see continue to flourish here. But so we do have programs that I think provide opportunities for students that, as you suggest, go beyond the boundaries of our individual schools and programs. And in fact, our students here are very flexible in the way they move across the boundaries of our schools. So we have many students here because they are interested in leadership in all of its dimensions. We have students here who are combining business and international affairs, or business and economics, or music and history. It's a common phenomenon here to have students who really do look for a larger perspective that crosses disciplinary boundaries here. And we do have programs like the Honors Program and the Women's Leadership Program that enable them to do that. So I think these are important ways of meeting the interests of students and continuing to attract the kind of high caliber students that we are so successful now in attracting.
Thank you. Your comment, please, a question.
My name is Sarah Lefferts, and I think we're all very excited about the announcement about Michelle Obama's challenge to the students. And I was glad to hear today that it involves the entire GW community. So I thought maybe you could expand upon that, about how maybe there will be events planned to incorporate the faculty and the staff to specifically do some more service to help the students raise that.
Yes, yeah, we're going to continue to announce opportunities for doing that. There are a number of events that are coming up. I'm going to be involved shortly in a neighborhood cleanup event personally, and so we'll be producing those. We've established a website which is going to be advertising those. I'm looking. I might need some help on what the name of the website is, but we'll get that out. We'll get the word out to alumni about where you can go to get that. We're also developing a system for tracking the hours that count toward this total, because we have to make sure that we can really give a number we're confident about, so that there aren't. We're going to be very sincere and focused in the way in which we track and count and report those numbers, so there isn't any criticism that we're just making the numbers up. They're going to be auditable numbers that we'll have. So we'll get back to you on that.
Thank you. And yes, your observation or question.
Hi, my name is Joelle Aguirre. I'm a current graduate student in the School of Graduate Education and Human Development. I'm also a staff member in Human Resources here at the university. I have the pleasure of doing new employee orientation almost every Monday for the university, and I'm always very pleased to see that alumni are always among the new employees that show up every Monday. To that end, I'd like you to speak on GW as a preeminent employer in the Metro DC area, and what investments, if any, you're making into human resources. Understandably, our strategic plan focuses more so on GW as a preeminent academic institution, but I wanted to know if you're making any investments in human resources.
Well, let me say, first of all, I think staff are a very critical part of our community, of our university community, and we are maybe a little bit unusual in the extent to which current students, as well as alumni, do work in the university here. And part of it has to do with the fact that we have that concentration of 70,000 alumni here in the region, so we have access to a lot of alumni who work here as volunteers, but also come to work here as employees. I've been very interested in seeing us build up staff recognition events. We've actually put some resources into that. We have a new head of human resources who's coming, I think, next month, joining us in the university, whose name is Louis Lemieux. He's coming to us from Columbia University, and I had a chance to talk to him, and just so we could exchange our views on our shared vision for ways of making this university, which is already the largest private employer in the District of Columbia, we'd like the university to become the employer of choice for talented individuals who want to be part of a vital organization. So we have a lot of ideas about how to do that. He has a lot of ideas about how to do that, and I certainly plan to support his work through the Executive Vice President and Treasurer, Lou Katz. He's part of that organization. But I've already had many conversations with Lou Katz about what we need to do to continue to build up and to support our HR programs when it comes to orientation, training, also opening career paths, making sure that When people come to this institution, they have opportunities for advancement, and we support them as they develop their careers. One of the things I feel very strongly is, people often worry if employees leave an institution to go get a job somewhere else. I actually don't think that's a bad thing. If we train people here, can go and sometimes get even higher positions in another institution. It's another way in which we contribute to the many professions that we're part of here. So it's important that we become not just the largest employer, but also the employer of choice for this whole region.
Yes, Matt.
Hi, I'm Matt Lindsay. I had a question just as you go out and meet alumni and talk with them. Obviously, many people have different ideas and probably come to you and propose separate ideas. Are there specific areas where you're looking for alumni feedback or ideas? I mean, in your opinion, you probably hear lots of different ideas for partnerships or working with students. But are there specific things that jump out to you where you really feel alumni can share their voice and and spark some new initiatives for the university?
Well, I think one of the important kinds of feedback we get from alumni is advice on how to communicate with alumni, because we can't take for granted that we necessarily know the best way to do that, and that's something I've really emphasized as I've gone to cities and both within the United States and also around the world. What can we do better to meet your needs as an alumni community? And we've gotten a lot of feedback that I think has made a difference to the way in which we do that. And Adrienne Rolnick is here, our Associate Vice President for Alumni Relations, and I think she's been very focused on and responsive to that kind of feedback we're getting. I met with a new African American advisory board, alumni advisory board, just yesterday, and they presented to me a full report with many different slides of a host of ideas that they have for ways in which we can improve our outreach to and connection with the African American community. And that's a vital kind of information and feedback for us to get, and it will have a concrete impact on what we do. I think another thing that it's good to hear from alumni is, what are they interested in? If I go to a city and bring some faculty along, as we're now starting to do more and more, to serve on a panel to help engage alumni in the intellectual excitement of what's going on at our university, what would they like to hear about? What are the subjects that they would be interested in hearing about, so that helps us guide us in thinking about how we're going to structure those events. And we have had some great panels. We had one in Miami last year on Latin American issues. In each of these cases, we often have a dean and several members of the faculty who come along with us. We did one in the region here last year on political campaigns and use of technology in political campaigns, which was something that people were interested in hearing about. And I think the more of that we do, the more we'll strengthen that connection and remind alumni of what it was like to be a student. And I think that's an important way of reconnecting our alumni with the life of the university. So, but again, it's important, I think, that we get feedback from alumni themselves on the best ways of doing that and what they'd really like to receive from us. And we've also gotten advice on ways in which they can help us strengthen our career services that we provide for students as well as for alumni, as we were talking about earlier. So in a host of ways, I think there are many things that our alumni are in touch with that are of benefit to us. I mentioned the Green Council because we have alumni who are out there in the industries that are really developing the new technologies and that are experts who are advising the policymakers, and so we benefit from alumni. One of the first things, when I had my inauguration events here back in November of 2007, we sort of turned the tables. We had alumni come back and teach professors. That was sort of the idea. We had alumni panels, and we had their faculty, and so we had experts in a whole range of fields: finance, the arts, political campaigns, a whole series of panels. And the faculty who had taught those alumni when they were students were there listening to their ideas from the real world. So to have that reversal and have that connection come back, I think, was very powerful. And I'd like to see more of that kind of connection being made.
Well, it is 70 events, 4 days, one university. So yes. We're going to move on with the rest of our alumni weekend. I think first and foremost, we want to thank all of you for coming to Washington this weekend and reconnect with this marvelous institution, for your presence here this morning. And to you, President Knapp, and Diane is off to a buffet breakfast, I think, at 11:30 this morning, so she'll be quite visible. She's added such a wonderful presence, I think, to our GW community. She's always a great pleasure and such an enthusiastic supporter of everything we do. And we want to thank you and congratulate you and thank you for your time this morning.
Well, it's my pleasure, and please enjoy the weekend, everyone. It's a beautiful weekend here, and a great time of the year to be in a very great university in a very great capital city, and I know I'll be seeing many of you around campus for the remainder of our 70 events. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Just terrific.